Thank you. Hello. Thanks everyone for coming. And this is Gan Chen from IBM Garage and specialize in the innovation on app modernization in a hybrid cloud environment. So today I want to kind of quickly talk about IBM's point of view when it comes to app modernization, right? And we're going to focus on some of the very important aspects of the automation on part of the app modernization journey. And then, I'll kind of talk a little bit about IBM Cloud Paks and how that can help you on that journey. And towards the end, I'm going to tell some stories of how IBM Garage, helped one of our customers on adopting that journey. You don't have to read through this in detail, but typically the modernization journey starts with the inventory. Just understand your existing legacy applications, your existing application, identify them probably into categories like they're ready for cloud, or they may be ready for the cloud, or they're not that ready for the cloud, right? Identify your inventory, and that's typically the first step when you start your modernization journey. Now, once you have the inventory, understand your problem, right? And there are sets of strategies or patterns you can execute in terms of the modernization. Right? From the far left, you're looking at a bunch of legacy applications. It could be mainframe app, it could be DB2, WebSphere, Java EE based, messaging based to IIB or MQ. Now, how do I take those applications and move them, adopt them into the cloud? Right? Could be when I say cloud here on the right hand side, it could be public cloud and private cloud as well. And there are multiple patterns you can take. Right? You can use the strangler pattern, right? Or you can just simply expose those legacy or existing applications through some modern REST APIs, or expose them as the easy consumable services. Or you break the monolith application into modern microservices approach. So all these slides try to tell is you're probably not going to just have there's no single solution to take your existing legacy application on the journey to modernize it onto the cloud. One of my colleagues, Roland Barcia, kind of had this tweet. It got a lot of attraction. It just, he's stopped talking about he called his Microsoft fatigue, right? Look, back 1 or 2 years ago, is microservices is the only approach when it moved to the cloud, but in reality, probably it is not. But there are other approaches, other solutions. It is one of the solutions. So I just want to kind of call that out. Now, here's a little bit our point of view when it comes to modernization. From the top to the bottom, right? Looking at your existing inventory of the application you want to modernize, and you can just contain or expose them through things like APIs or connectors, right? And expose those as more cloud-friendly APIs, so your applications, innovations side application can invoke them. Those typically happens to your traditional core transactional workloads. Or you can do so-called lift and shift, right? A simple example of a lift and shift is basically take your existing applications or middleware software, package them as a container, and run them in a public cloud or private cloud with some common runtimes like Kubernetes or OpenShift. And that's one valid solution. And the other one, which happens very frequently, is analyze your application, the monolith application, break it down into smaller pieces, and leveraging the microservices approach, right? And you further down the stack, you also have option when it comes to the cloud. It's just some of the services, you can just use SaaS services. For example, database as a service, right? For those applications, you don't have to rebuild and just use the software as a services approach. And one of the tough or challenging one is really the bottom one is when it comes to cloud adoption is the data. How do I modernize my data? How do I modernize my governance? Right, existing all the securities and legacy information. And that's the spectrums, from my point of view, that you're probably going to experience as part of the modernization journey. one thing I want to really call out is on part of the app modernization journey, it's not just simply migrate or update your application, the business logic itself, but there's other parts. One of them, probably one of the most important thing is the automation, really from end to end. This covers from the application DevOps aspects all the way towards the day two or the operation, monitoring and logging. How do I have the end-to-end automation strategy? So if you start with, I have my application code migrated and managed through some softwares like a Trello, and then push that code into some code repositories like a GitHub or some other enterprise source control management, and that triggers the build process through certain software tools like Jenkins and some other softwares, and then all the way to deploy that in the automated pipeline. So in this particular example we're looking at is one customer we help them migrate. They're running the workload on Kubernetes on the AWS platform, right? So the pipeline itself will automate the entire process of building the application and push that all the way to the production, development, and testing environment, all automated. So that's very key as part of the journey, is to ensure you build that pipeline throughout. Probably start the day one when you even kind of take on the journey of modernization. And here's another example where the automation has that effect on the part of the journey, right? So we kind of built some assets. It's basically leveraging the Terraform or the AWS CloudFormation to automate the provisioning of the Kubernetes distribution. In this case, is Red Hat OpenShift, right? And we kind of released this in the public GitHub. What this does is, with a single button click, right, or the infrastructure as code, I'm going to go in and provision the entire stack of the infrastructure on AWS, all the way from EC2 instances to the networking, the VPC, to configure all the security IAM roles and policies, and all the way down to pull down the software, the container images from Red Hat, and install and configure the OpenShift cluster. The entire process is highly automated. So in this approach, and I can just kind of completely redeploy this stack, right, either in my dev environment, in my testing and QA. So those are very critical as part of the journey. Now, when it comes to modernization, and assuming you have existing middleware software, right, from IBM, like Webster, DB2, and one of the efforts we have is called IBM Compaq. That essentially is a set of certified images. We're taking our middleware, right, make them certified on Red Hat OpenShift, and make them ready for the cloud adoption on AWS. Right, so that's the essence of the cloud packs you can leverage on part of your journey. And we kind of based on the existing portfolios, and we have covers the spectrums of functions, right? We have the cloud pack for data, which covers the data and the AI aspects. And we have integration cloud pack that covers aspects if you have MQ, message brokers, and API gateways, right? So that's kind of will help you with pre-certified container images, and you can just focus on migrating your application and the pipelines, but leave those middleware and the core software stack migration to us. So, IBM Garage, and we're the new innovation, like a special division within IBM, that just definitely try to bring in the startup culture into the enterprise to influence how this app modernization process, right? So some of our key principle is executing agile and nimble, and do things, try things, fail fast, and execute fast. And one of the example, like I'm going to kind of tell the story I personally went through with one of the customers' app modernization journey. And the session really starts with understand the user, understand the customer, what the pain points they're trying to solve, right? Why they do the modernization. So we do the design session, right? in leveraging that design session to understand your user, understand the problem. And then we kind of have the 2 days framing session. And we realized what this customer wanted to do is they have a set of legacy Java EE application, right, hosting their core transaction system. And those systems has been out there for years, and very few developers still understand their code, right? And then they're still hard to maintain. So we had a framing session or architecture design session, work together with client to understand their existing infrastructure, existing application stack, and the build and the deployment process, define that as is, and then we work together to define the to-be scenario. Let's say from this modernization journey, what do you try to achieve, right? Define some very valid achievement or the goals, like I want to deploy how many times a day, and then identify the quick architecture, the to-be architecture, how we want to kind of, after the modernization, how your architecture should look like. And then we start the actual project after we identify the minimum viable products or MVP of that modernization target. And we're going to send developers, Garage developers, working together with the customers, leveraging some of the Garage methodologies like pair programming, test-driven development. So we're going to build the test case, and we're going to pair with customer together to actually go through that migration or modernization process. And as part of the process for this particular client, not only we started the application track, but in the meantime, we started the DevOps track or SRE track simultaneously. So while the developers are migrating the code, we'll start building the DevOps pipeline, we'll start building the deployment pipelines in the same time. So this way, later on, when I kind of start rolling more application, the more migration, modernization, I can just leverage the same pipeline, almost think of as a factory or assembly line. So that's kind of very key. That falls on my earlier points of automation. And then we kind of push this all the way through, this minimal viable products, right, all the way through to production system. So the point of push it to the production system is to validate our hypotheses. If we believe this is the right approach, you should modernize your application, why not we send it all the way to production and see the actual reaction and evaluate the results, right? And that's what we call the MVP, is not just a POC or pilot. It has to be all the way into the production to see the results. And then that cycle repeats. We evaluate on this journey and what went wrong and what went well, and then we learn from it. And then we kind of help the customer to adopt that journey to improve the process. And this cycle repeats, and that's where we kind of hand it over to the clients. So in about 7 weeks' time, we kind of migrated or helped to modernize the application, the legacy application, 2 core transaction applications into the cloud, leveraging the Garage methods and approach. And we publish some of those lessons learned and best practices from the Garage experience into the IBM Architecture Center, Garage Methods Architecture Center. And we publish our point of view and some of the best practice. Please just check out those links. Those are public available, open for everyone. And with that, I think feel free to visit us at IBM booth at the Garage. And Anna here has some small runbooks about how to execute a Garage project, modernization projects. Feel free to grab a book. And thank you very much, Rob.